Welcome to WhiskyCast, cask strength conversation featuring news and interviews from the world of whiskey. I'm Mark Gillespie, and this is episode number 1161 for May 10th, 2026. Coming up in a few minutes.
There's been a whole generation raised within this kind of focus on craft. And so I really do believe the next 10 years are the time when true craft distillers will have their day. It's just a question of getting that information to people, and, people will formulate their own opinions about what's important to them as far as craft goes.
The American Craft Spirits Association has unveiled a new certification mark for craft spirits. The Certified Craft label is designed to help consumers identify spirits from small-scale producers in much the same way the Estate Whiskey Alliance seal helps consumers pick whiskeys from farm-to-glass distilleries. I'll talk with Colin Spoelman of Brooklyn's Kings County Distillery and new ACSA Chief Executive Emily Pennington about the program on this week's WhiskyCast In-Depth. We'll also taste some of the week's new whiskeys and go behind the label and much more. The news is next on this week's WhiskyCast, whiskey's longest-running and most awarded podcast series.
Hey friends, it's Gabriel with Jewers here. If you're watching the U.S. Open this year, or you've got Father's Day coming up and you just want to get it right, there's a bottle that I would keep an eye out for. I'll explain.
Let's begin with the week's news. Bardstown Bourbon Company is facing a second discrimination lawsuit filed by a female former employee. Sandra Stone filed the lawsuit this week in Nelson County Superior Court, accusing Bardstown Bourbon of age and sex discrimination. She was 67 years old when she was passed over for a bottling supervisor position that was given to a younger male colleague. Stone resigned after she was told she could be reassigned to a clerk's job and take a substantial pay cut. She's represented by the same attorney who's representing Sylvia Sanders in her discrimination lawsuit against Bardstown Bourbon. That case is ongoing, and Bardstown Bourbon has not responded to Stone's allegations yet. Diageo beat third-quarter sales estimates this week, despite ongoing weakness in North America. New CEO Sir Dave Lewis said fixing North American sales would be his biggest challenge to solving the company's ongoing problems. The world's largest drinks company reported 0.3% growth globally during the third quarter, even though analysts had predicted a 2.3% decline. The results were based on increased demand for Guinness in the UK and Ireland and advanced sales in Latin America and the Caribbean ahead of the World Cup next month. North American sales were down 9.4%, and Diageo has responded by cutting prices on some of its tequila brands. No words of cut in whiskey pricing, though. Campari Group shares fell this week after the Italian-based company issued earnings that missed analysts' first-quarter estimates. Even though Campari reported 2.9% organic sales growth for the year so far, analysts had forecast 5.1% growth. Campari executives expect growth this year to be consistent in the 3% range. Campari owns Glen Grant Scotch Whiskey, Wild Turkey Bourbon, and 40 Creek Canadian Whiskey. The Spirit of Speyside Festival reported record ticket sales for this year's festival, which ended on Monday. More than £500,000 worth of tickets were sold for the festival's 600-plus events. Festival organizers have also announced that the Distilled Spirit of Speyside Festival will return this September. It'll be in Elgin on September 11th and 12th. Meanwhile, the Tamdhu 21-year-old single malt took overall top honors in the festival's annual competition. It was also the category winner in the 18 years and over category. Aberlour 12-year-old won the 12 years and younger category, while the Craigellachie 17-year-old single cask bottled for the festival won in the 13 to 17 years old category. And the recent Texas Whiskey Festival has announced its competition winners. Garrison Brothers Cowboy Bourbon took Best Bourbon honors, while the Cooper's Family Barrel Reserve Rye won Best Rye Whiskey. Andalusia Whiskey Company's Cigar Malt won Best Whiskey honors, while its Madeira Cask Striker was named Best Cask Finished Whiskey. Finally, Austin 121 was named the Best Light Whiskey. New whiskeys of note this week. Glenmorangie unveiled its Harrison Ford Edition single malt Monday on Star Wars Day. The single malt was finished in toasted Portuguese wine casks, and there's a companion film on the Glenmorangie website that includes Ford's comments on working with Glenmorangie whiskey maker Dr. Bill Lumsden.
Dr. Bill don't tell me how to act, and I don't tell Dr. Bill how to make whiskey. I said, Dr. Bill, you make me a whiskey that I'm going to like, and you're going to be proud of. And that's what I have.
The whiskey is available for $99.99 a bottle while supplies last. I received a sample this week and will have my tasting notes for it soon. Not to be outdone, Laphroaig has released Willem by Willem, a 14-year-old single malt in collaboration with actor Willem Dafoe. It's an Oloroso cask-finished malt that Dafoe picked with Laphroaig senior whiskey maker Sarah Dowling. It's priced at £139 in the UK, $156 a bottle in the US. Signatory has bottled a special Ben Nevis single cask named for the Tartan Army, Scotland's football fans, ahead of the World Cup. It's an 11-year-old Ben Nevis matured in Oloroso sherry casks and is available through Royal Mile Whiskies for £45.95 a bottle. Isle of Raasay Distillery has released a new single malt matured in Hungarian oak, ex-Oloroso sherry barriques. The goal was to have the Oloroso sweetness temper some of the Hungarian oak's natural spiciness. 8,000 bottles will be available globally with a recommended retail price of £80 a bottle. The Grant family's House of Hazelwood brand has released the latest edition of the Charles Gordon collection. There are 4 whiskeys drawn from the Gordon family's inventory of maturing whiskey: a 1977 Girvan single grain, a 47-year-old blended Scotch, and 46 and 45-year-old blended malts. Pricing ranges from £3,200 to £4,000 each. Suntory Global Spirits has released the 10th edition in Freddie Knows Little Book series. Freddie says Chapter 10 comes from what he learned from the chapters before it. It's made from small batch collection whiskeys and Jim Beam finished in sherry and toasted bourbon casks. It's priced at $159.99 a bottle. Kentucky's Preservation Distillery has unveiled the first bottling of Very Old St. Nick Immaculata in 4 years. It's a limited release that includes the distillery's own pot still wheated bourbon, along with a 10-year-old high rye Kentucky bourbon and a 19-year-old Kentucky bourbon. All 3 casks have been maturing at Preservation's Rickhouse in Bardstown. Lot 1 will go on sale at the distillery this coming Saturday, May 16th. I have a sample, and I'll have my tasting notes for it next time around. Chicken Cock Whiskey has released the first wheated bourbon in the brand's 168-year history. The whiskey replaces Chicken Cock Small Batch in the brand's core range and is made from a mash bill of 68% corn, 20% wheat, and 12% malted barley. It'll carry a recommended retail price of $54.99 a bottle. I received a sample this week, and I'll have my tasting notes for it soon at WhiskyCast.com. New Riff Distilling is releasing its 2026 single malt whiskey this Friday at the distillery. It comes from 6 different 100% barley varietals, including Chevalier, an 1800s British malt variety, and it was matured in 5 different cask types. It'll be available at retailers and online for $69.99 a bottle. Luxco's Penelope Bourbon has released the latest edition in its Coopers series. Riviera blends 8-year-old American light whiskey with bourbon and is finished in rosé wine casks from southern France. It'll be available nationally starting this month. There's no word on pricing. Michigan's Round Barn Distillery is kicking off a new Lighthouse series of bourbons, starting with Watchman Barrel Strength. It's an 8-year-old bourbon bottled at 57.5% ABV. 3 more bourbons in the series will be released later this year. And finally, Bonhams will auction 2 rare Japanese whiskeys later this month in Hong Kong, a Yamazaki 50-year-old bottled for Tokyo's Club Natsumi, and a 1960 Kurosawa that is the oldest ever released from the now-closed distillery. The treasure ship bottling, named for the hand-carved netsuke around the bottle's neck, is one of only 41 bottles of the 52-year-old whiskey. Both are expected to sell for around $300,000 each. You can keep up on the latest whiskey news all week long at whiskycast.com and in the WhiskyCast community app. Let's check the calendar now and see what's happening around the world of whiskey. Maltstock Down Under gets underway Friday night in Boswell, Tasmania, and runs through Sunday. Saturday brings us the Somerton Whiskey Festival in St. Albans, England, and Sagamore Spirit Distillery's first Whiskey on the Waterfront party of the summer in Baltimore, Maryland. The Whiskey Exchange hosts Maker's Mark Master Distiller Blake Layfield for a tasting of Star Hill Farm whiskies on the 20th at its Great Portland Street shop in London. Moonshine University's next Stave and Thief Society Executive Bourbon Steward course is May 22nd in Louisville, Kentucky. And the annual Fagile gets underway on Isla May 22nd and runs through May 30th. If you're organizing a whiskey event, let us know about it. We'll add it to the calendars at whiskycast.com and in the WhiskyCast community app.
Every year, we've been releasing a Dewar's 19-Year-Old Champions Edition alongside the U.S. Open, a limited-release whiskey that's directly tied to the tournament. Now, 19 years is not a number you see every day on a bottle of whiskey, but in golf it kind of makes sense. The 19th hole, that round after the round, where the stories usually are a little better than some folks' scorecards. This year, the championships at Shinnecock Hills in Long Island, and instead of just putting that on the label and calling it a day, we build it into the whiskey. After 19 years of maturation, this whiskey's finished in Cabernet Franc wine casks from Wolfer Estate, right there on Long Island. So there's a real connection to the place, not just in name, but in the liquid itself. On the palate, you'll get some of that red fruit, with a bit of floral lift and a touch of spice from the higher ABV, but it still drinks like Dewar's. Honeyed, soft oak, balanced, nothing is out of place. It also lands right around Father's Day, making it an easy gift. Limited release, once a year, with Shinnecock Hills on the bottle. Great for golf fans, but just really a well-made whiskey. Keep an eye out for it. Copyright 2026, Dewar's is a trademark. Imported by John Dewar & Sons Company, Coral Gables, Florida. Blended Scotch whiskey, 43% alcohol by volume.
WhiskyCast In-Depth is brought to you by Glendalough Irish Whiskey. Liquor store shelves can be confusing with dozens of whiskeys to choose from. Suppose, for instance, you want to spend your money on a whiskey from a small craft distillery. How do you decide what's craft and what isn't? Now, the American Craft Spirits Association has created a new way to solve that problem. The ACSA's Certified Craft Seal can be used on bottles of spirits that meet the ACSA standards for membership. It's a project several years in the making, and I discussed it the other day with Colin Spoelman of Kings County Distilling in Brooklyn, New York, and new ACSA CEO Emily Pennington. I'll leave this to the two of you to decide who wants to answer this, but what was the need for a certification mark for a craft seal for craft spirits?
I could take it for my side. I mean, I as a craft distiller who's been working for 16 years, there's always been interest in having a sort of distinction between commercial products and craft products. I mean, that's something that has been hotly debated for quite a while. I think the urgency has really come about because as we go through this contracted period in the market, it really has become clear that small distillers are at a pretty significant disadvantage in the three-tier system in the marketplace, and so this really became a sort of urgent value proposition relative to maybe something that was a mark of pride for a distiller. It was really, this is a way that we can actually see to help sell products.
Yeah, and I'll just add a little context. Colin was working on this project like a few years before I ever even joined ACSA. So he has much more historical knowledge on this project than I do. But, since I've been here in the last couple of years, certainly our members have been saying over and over and over that what they need the most help with these days is sales and marketing, right? They make excellent products, but the part that they have the most trouble with is getting in front of consumers, whether that's regionally or nationally. So I think in addition to what Colin said, our thought process is that we can help them with a sort of unifying symbol that indicates craft in any market that they're in.
What does this mean for consumers?
Well, for consumers, it is a mark of you can trust that if a brand has the craft certification seal, that it is a small brand. So there's a limit to the amount that a distiller can produce to have the seal. That they're independent, so there's no amount of ownership that can be from a large company, and that it's transparent, that it's forthright with consumers, which is part of the ACSA Code of Ethics, and it becomes a way to sort of peer review the seal. So ACSA members, it's by us for us. So that makes it sort of advantageous.
What did you learn from spearheading the Empire Rye project, Colin, that helped you with this one?
Well, for one, that it was something that consumers would pay attention to. Empire Rye was a project that was begun really out of an ACSA convention where a number of New York distillers got together, and Nicole Austin, on behalf of Kings County, kind of came back and said, this Empire Rye project is a way to bring New York distillers together and promote what we're up to. And now that project has been active for almost 9 years. And we put the seal very proudly on every bottle of rye whiskey that we make. And it has had it's helped sales. It's helped consumers understand rye whiskey better. And so it's my hope that the seal does that, not just for New York whiskey, but and not even just for whiskey, but for anybody making spirits. And that, I think, is such a great opportunity of it. I think in the whiskey world, we sometimes get very caught up in sort of whiskey debates about who's distilling and finishing and blending. And, that piece of it is ultimately a sort of smaller piece when considering the craft spirits landscape as a whole.
I asked earlier what this means for consumers. How will consumers be able to tell whether it's certified craft or not?
Well, this is an easy one. Hopefully, we have a variety of ways that distillers, craft distillers, can implement the seal. So they can put it on their website. They can put it on any digital assets. They can put it on their bottle in a variety of different ways. If you want to take the leap, you can actually print it on your bottles, but you can also do a sticker, or you can do a neck tag hanger, etc. So that should certainly be the primary indicator, is seeing that seal.
How did the pilot program work?
Well, we invited some of the board members of ACSA who were closer to the part of the development of the mark to put it on their bottles. And so I think as of now, there's probably about 10 or 15 distillers in the market who are already using the seal. And as Emily was saying, it's not just putting the seal on the bottle next to the UPC or next to any other sort of required, sort of different certifications. It's also, you can put it on shelf talkers, on posters, on a plaque at the distillery, on window clings. So it really is designed to be sort of a way, and hopefully ultimately a way for retailers to understand and possibly even showcase craft. So, here's our local shelf, here's our Scotch shelf, and then here's our certified craft shelf. That would be a big win for, I think, ACSA members.
How is the industry doing these days with the consolidation that's going on?
Well, it's an irony, because I think many of us would be doing a lot better were it not for the broad troubles of a very small few. And so, to some extent, our brand is growing, and we know that because we see direct-to-consumer sales that New York gave us the ability to ship direct-to-consumer about a year and a half ago. Our New York state business is growing, where we act as our own distributor. But then in other territories where we are several brands down a chain of hierarchy, in those states we do we do less well, and we are suffering through some of the broad shifts that are happening in the industry. So we at ACSA and part of the board has been really looking for ways to create market access to small distillers because of this problem, which is just that inevitably we are down the chain of suppliers. We're not consolidated. We are independent. That was an advantage to a craft distiller for the first 10 years of this American whiskey boom, craft spirits boom. Now it actually has become a liability, in part because of just the mechanism of selling alcohol in the United States. So our hope is that the end goal of this is really market access for small distillers. And there are, other initiatives like direct-to-consumer shipping in more states, and the ability to self-distribute in more states. These are also important things, I think, for ACSA. But those things are legislatively focused, and that has its own process, whereas this is consumer focused. And sometimes you can get to consumers faster than you can get to legislators.
Emily?
Yeah, I think Colin covered it beautifully. I mean, I would say we have reporting. We do the annual Sovos DTC report. We do the craft spirits data report, and we can see that demand for craft is still there. But the challenge is market access, right? And being squeezed through consolidation in the second tier. So I think Colin put it perfectly. Like, this is a different way to sort of try to provide more opportunities for craft distillers, because the demand is there, and for consumers to be able to find the products that they want easier.
Do you see any problems from the what appears to be the collapse of Republic National Distribution Company in many markets?
100%, and that it reverberates throughout other. In every market, in every distribution, and at retail, that sort of disruption is pretty substantive for the remainder of the industry. And as Kings County, for our part, we've been around for 16 years, and we've really been isolated from a lot of that because we just chose not to ever do a national strategy distributor. And really try to sell everything as directly as possible, and cut out as many middlemen. And that is still extraordinarily challenging to do that. And I think, but it does also provide a roadmap for other craft distillers. So less in New York State, where we have more direct relationship with retail bars and restaurants. But I think this is true for any distiller in any state, and ultimately control states become a lot more appealing because they, by their nature, they're sort of insulated from the broad drama of the spirits industry. But I would say the middle tier especially, but even the supply tier, with what's going on with Brown-Forman and tariffs and whatever global winds are blowing, to some extent, that it does trickle down to the little guy who's got a distill pub in a mid-sized American city, who's just trying to kind of reach a city market or a regional market.
Emily?
I mean, I can't speak to the firsthand knowledge, right? Because ACSA doesn't deal specifically with distributors, but I can certainly speak to the feedback that we get, that our members are worried, right? And it is creating more challenges. And I think one of the things that we see in our data and our feedback is that as a result of sort of the chaos that's happening in the middle tier, a lot of our distillers are pulling back on their businesses, and the that they work in, either by choice or because they have to, and they end up focusing more on their tasting rooms, which isn't necessarily what they want to do. Sometimes it's more about survival rather than being able to expand it at this time. So that's generally my observations on it without dealing with it firsthand.
Colin, I know you had a milestone recently at the distillery, right?
Yes, we just sold our 1 millionth bottle, which was really exciting. We also, a lot of those bottles were small, so I think there's maybe a little bit of a caveat there, but it was in fact 1 million bottles, and for a small distillery, that's a pretty big deal. So we were excited to share that news with people.
Congratulations.
Thanks.
Yeah, I think similar to Colin, I think most of the news out there is pretty doom and gloom in the craft space, but we absolutely have members and people are regularly coming to me and talking about their distillery is still in growth mode. Even though craft is sort of hurting right now and, the sales have plateaued, there are plenty of people who are still doing well.
Yeah, and maybe I'll just add just one final note on top of that, which is just that, for a long time, anything was growing. I mean, any whiskey, any spirit, there was a novelty factor that had been missing from the spirits business. And so I think craft rose to meet that challenge. But there wasn't a lot of scrutiny. I mean, it was kind of like anybody new and anything, and there was a lot of stuff, in particular in the whiskey space, that I saw that I was like, why are people buying this? But it's just rebranded something else. But now I think there's been a whole generation raised within this kind of focus on craft. And so I really do believe the next 10 years are the time when true craft distillers will have their day. It's just a question of getting that information to people, and people will formulate their own opinions about what's important to them as far as craft goes. But I think ACSA really represents the people who are making it themselves for the most part. They're distillers, they're innovators, they're creative people playing in extraordinarily fun ways. We see it at the competition every year. That's really what consumers really do want. And I think something probably the bigger suppliers and distillers should pay attention to. This is what people are excited about, and we're happy to represent that.
Yeah. And the last thing I just want to close out on the seal is to go off of what Colin said, is like, we all know that people really care about where their money goes these days, right? Buying local is saying something about who you are and sort of where you belong. And it's almost like a little bit of like a civic pride, maybe, right? When something is made nearby, people feel like they can trace it. There's a level of accountability there that matters. And so why I think the seal helps with that is that it almost extends that local feeling to producers who may not be geographically like close to where it's being sold, right? It almost transfers that sense of trust into a larger regional or national context, right? Like even if it wasn't made in your town, you see that seal and you know that it was made in a town like yours. Right. And so that's another way that I like to think the seal benefits independent and craft distillers.
Thanks to Colin Spoelman of Kings County Distilling and Emily Pennington of the American Craft Spirits Association for joining us this week on WhiskyCast In-Depth. It's brought to you by Glendalough Irish Whiskey.
Our story begins in the wilds of County Wicklow, the Garden of Ireland. Place where nature moves slowly and meaningfully. Some whiskies blend in. Glendalough Double Barrel stands apart. I'm Rowdy Rooney, head distiller here at Glendalough, and I personally oversee our whiskey making process from start to finish. We do things slowly and we do them right. We start with a smooth single grain Irish whiskey. We age it in flame charred American oak for soft vanilla and a honeyed depth. Then we finish it in Oloroso casks from a small bodega in Spain. Casks we season and ship ourselves to make sure the wood is still alive with character when it arrives. That kind of care gives Glendalough Double Barrel its rich layers of dried fruit, warm spice and signature smoothness. This is a whiskey at its own pace, and it's worth every second. This is Glendalough Double Barrel, crafted to stand apart.
This week's tasting notes are brought to you by Lost Lantern Whiskey. Let's start with the Glendalough Harrison Ford edition we heard about during the news. Once again, it's finished in toasted Portuguese wine casks and bottled at 46.5% ABV. The nose has touches of orange marmalade, honeysuckle, beeswax, peaches, and vanilla. The taste is citrusy and powerful, with a bite of grapefruit, apricots, brown sugar, and a hint of spearmint that leads into the finish. The finish is long and gentle with touches of orange marmalade, oak tannins, and leather. It's very nice, and I'm scoring the Glenmorangie Harrison Ford edition a 94. Last week I mentioned the Virginia Distillery Company's Split Project, a blend of 50% American single malt and 50% bourbon from Bardstown Bourbon Company. I received a sample this week. It's bottled at 45% ABV. The nose is dry and dusty with dried fruits, honey, salted caramel, soft spices, and a hint of oak. The taste is dominated by baking spices with a creamy undertone of dried fruits, honey, and caramel candy. The finish is long and aromatic with spices that curl up into your nose, very warming with a touch of honeycomb. I'm scoring the Virginia Distillery Company's Split Project American Whiskey a 93. And finally, there aren't very many independent bottlings of Torabeg single malt on the market, but the folks at Dramore have bottled a single cask as part of their spring releases. Cask 1163 was 7 years old and bottled at 56.7% ABV. The nose has touches of peat smoke, lemon zest, heather, gorse, and dried fruits. The taste has smokiness and sweetness in a nice balance with notes of lemon pepper, heather, honey, and vanilla. The finish is long and smoky with a lingering pepperiness, and I'm scoring the Dramore Torabeg single malt a 93. This week's tasting notes are brought to you by Lost Lantern Whiskey. Serious about whiskey? Lost Lantern is too. Two whiskey nerds built Lost Lantern as a curator, not a distiller, tracking down distinctive casks from standout American producers. Think of Lost Lantern as an adventure in discovering the best American whiskey, each bottle exploring a new distillery, a new story. It's proof that not all who wander are lost. Discover the whiskey producers you should know about with Lost Lantern, shining a light on the independent spirit. Let's open up the inbox now and see what people are talking about this week. I posted a photo of my Glenmorangie Harrison Ford sample on Instagram after it arrived on Tuesday. Hugo Dart posted from Brazil. Very excited about this one. They really did a brilliant job with the ads, though I don't think I'll ever see it here in Brazil. I'm not sure what global markets are getting it, but I hope it makes its way to Brazil for you, Hugo. Even though my Flyers have now been eliminated from the Stanley Cup playoffs, I'm still posting my hockey drams each night on social media. Friday night's hockey dram was the Mortlach 20-year-old single malt, and our good friend F. Paul Packelt posted this on Facebook. Mortlach 20 Cowie's Blue Seal is, I believe, as delicious as Speyside single malt gets, a classic bottling from this overlooked distillery. The Atlantic reported this week that FBI Director Kash Patel has been giving engraved bottles of Woodford Reserve as gifts. I posted a link to the Atlantic article in the WhiskyCast community app without comment, and Darren from Chicago posted a very long comment. I'm editing it for brevity here. Mark, I've been very much impressed with your ability to give us spirits industry news without editorial or opinion. I quite frankly don't know how you do it. My wife and I have stopped purchasing and talking about anything regarding Brown-Forman. We really feel good about that and aren't missing it much. There are plenty of wonderful spirits brands and distillers out there that do still seem to have an interest in all customers and have some manner of producing good quality juice at the top of their list. My personal opinion, I did not make it political. Brown-Forman did. Again, I very much appreciate you reporting the news and letting us formulate our own opinions. This is why we love this forum you've created. I'm going to get back to having a tasty dram now. Thanks for the use of the hall. Thank you for your comment, Darren. We try very hard to keep politics out of WhiskyCast, except when it directly affects the whiskey industry, such as our ongoing coverage of President Trump's tariffs. We know there are people of all political beliefs within the whiskey community, and we believe that whiskey is one of the things that all sides can agree on. What's your take on this or any other whiskey-related topic? Download the free WhiskyCast community app from your app store and join the conversation. You can also find us on social media. Look for WhiskyCast on X, Blue Sky, Threads, Instagram, and Facebook. The email address is comments@whiskycast.com. Let's close out the show now with Behind the Label, our look at the history, science, and people who make whiskey unique. I mentioned light whiskey a couple of times during the news this week, and it's been a long time since we explained just what light whiskey is. No, it's not a diet whiskey. Light whiskey has the same amount of calories as regular whiskey, but it's distilled to a higher strength than bourbon. U.S. law sets a top distillation level for bourbons at 80% alcohol or 160 proof, but light whiskey is distilled to between 80 and 95% alcohol by volume, and it's aged in used oak or uncharred oak barrels, which give less wood influence on the taste and results in a softer, sweeter whiskey. Light whiskey was developed in the 1960s to compete with vodka and gin, which had started to take over the spirits market as whiskey sales started to lag. It never really caught on as its own category, but MGP has made a lot of it over the years. It's appeared in several High West expressions, and as I mentioned during the news, co-owned Penelope Bourbon has used it in its new Riviera blended whiskey. Probably the best thing to compare it to is single-grain Scotch whiskey. Both are generally light on the palate when young, and it's popular with bartenders as a base for cocktails. That's light whiskey in a nutshell. If you have something you'd like us to look at on an upcoming episode, just get in touch with us. That's all for this episode of WhiskyCast. You'll find links for the stories in this episode in our show notes at whiskycast.com. That's also where you'll find the latest whiskey news, my tasting notes, the calendar of events, the whiskey photo of the week, and, of course, a complete archive of our past episodes going all the way back to 2005. We'd love to hear from you. Look for WhiskyCast on Blue Sky, X, Instagram, Threads, and Facebook. Our email address is comments@whiskycast.com.
Our latest release of Dewar's 19-year-old Champions Edition, finished in Cabernet Franc wine casks, made for the 19th hole, and one worth having around when you get there. Keep an eye out for it. Cheers, friends.
WhiskyCast is a production of Cask Strength Media, copyright 2026, and comes to you each week from the charming, yet regrettably dry town of Haddonfield, New Jersey. I'm Mark Gillespie, reminding you that when you drink, please drink responsibly. Thanks for listening.